6 p.m. Cairo local time, and it's time for the English News Bulletin on Channel 2. This is Sahar Ping with the main headlines. President Sisi, Denmark's Prime Minister, stresses importance of full implementation of ceasefire in Gaza. Foreign Minister Badr Abdullah in Washington, a number of U.S. high-ranking officials. And the Israeli occupation forces killed 3 Palestinians, including 2 women, in West Bank. Welcome back. The news in full. President Sisi received a phone call on Tuesday from the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, during which they discussed the regional security and cooperation. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Mohammed Shenawi said that the call emphasized the importance of implementing the outcomes of President Sisi's recent visit to Denmark and strengthening the strategic partnership between the 2 countries. During the call, they changed the views on key regional and international developments, primarily the ongoing situation in Gaza, where they stressed the urgent need for full implementation of the ceasefire agreement, including the 3-phase truce enforcement, the exchange of the hostages and prisoners, and restricted entry of humanitarian aid to alleviate the serious humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. They also emphasized the importance of initiating reconstruction efforts in Gaza to ensure that it remains livable and secure for its residents, while rejecting any attempts at forced displacement. And Egypt asserted that the only means to face the threats to challenges that the international and regional peace and security is the adoption of the international community of the methodology taking into consideration the rights of all peoples in the region with no discrimination, including people who suffered a long, unprecedented infringement of its essential right, living in peace on its soil and its homeland. A statement by the Foreign Ministry said that Egypt calls on the international community for a unit for forging a political vision to settle the Palestinian cause based on ending the injustice to which the Palestinians are prone and regaining their undisposable legitimate rights. The statement also said that Egypt reiterated its rejection of any prejudice to the Palestinian legitimate right to self-determination, staying in their homeland and independence. Egypt also stressed that the international community's disregard of the handling regional crisis threatens to ruin the foundation of peace, for which efforts were exerted and sacrifices were made in dozens of years. And the Minister of Foreign Migration and Egyptian expatriates, Badr Abdullah, held a meeting in Washington with a number of high-ranking officials, including U.S. Congress Martio Diaz-Balart, Senator Brian Schatz-Moore, on the following foreign minister meetings in USA in the following report. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged Hamas to continue with the planned release of the hostages on Tuesday. After the Palestinian group announced its intention to hold the exchange, he said in a statement that we must avoid at all costs the resumption of the hostilities in Gaza that would lead to an immense tragedy. Guterres added that both sides must fully abide by their commitments in the ceasefire and resume the negotiations in Doha for the second phase. And the Hamas officials said on Tuesday Israeli hostages come brought home by Gaza only if the fragile is respected, dismissing the language of threats after U.S. President Donald Trump said the ceasefire should be cancelled if all the remaining hostages are not freed by midday Saturday. Hamas has started releasing some hostages gradually under the ceasefire in place since January 19th, but has postponed freeing any more until further notice, accusing Israeli occupation forces of violating the terms by continuing attacks on the Gaza Strip. The Minister of Foreign Migration and Egyptian expatriates Badr Abdelati held a meeting in Washington of high-ranking officials, including the U.S. Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart and U.S. Senator Brian Schatz. More on the following report.
Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati held talks with U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Officials said the talks discussed strategic ties between Egypt and the United States and means of boosting cooperation on various fields. They said the meeting also touched on situation in Gaza, the implementation of the Gaza ceasefire and efforts to ease the entry of humanitarian aid into the Strip. Also on Tuesday, Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati held a meeting in Washington with the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Congress. Abdelati said Egyptian-U.S. cooperation is important to achieve fair peace between the Palestinians and Israelis in line with the international legitimacy and establish a sovereign Palestinian state under a two-state solution. The meeting discussed developments in the Middle East, especially the Gaza ceasefire and the latest developments in Sudan, Syria, Lebanon, and Libya. Badr Abdelati also held talks with Susan Collins, head of the Credits Committee in Congress. Susan Waltz, officials said the meeting discussed bilateral ties and the role played by Egypt in boosting security and stability east. Both sides also discussed the Egyptian stand towards the Palestinian cause, the situation in Gaza Strip, and efforts to implement the Gaza ceasefire, as well as speeding up early recovery programs to prepare for the reconstruction phase.
And dozens of Palestinian families were forcefully driven out of their homes in Nur al-Shams refugee camp in the northern of the occupied West Bank by Israeli occupation troops. 3 Palestinians, including 2 women, one of them 8 months pregnant, and a young man, were killed in Nur al-Shams. The Israeli occupation said that they had launched an operation in Nur al-Shams, a part of the much larger campaign that began in January in Tulkrim and Jenin. At least 887 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank by Israeli occupation troops and shelters since the war began on Gaza. And Egypt's Rafah border crossing continuing entering humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. On Tuesday, tens of trucks are entering the Strip through the Oja and Karam Abu Salim crossing points amid coordination between Egypt and Palestinian Red Crescents by the virtue of the ceasefire agreement that began on Sunday, Jan 19. U.S. President Donald Trump will host Jordan's King Abdullah II at the White House later on Tuesday as he escalates the pressure on the Arab nation to take in refugees from Gaza. The visit is happening at a perilous moment of the ongoing ceasefire in Gaza, as Hamas accusing Israeli occupation forces of violating the truce and saying it's posing future releases of the hostages. Meanwhile, Trump has called for Israeli resume fighting if all those remaining in captivity are not freed by this weekend. And Lebanon's new Prime Minister Nawaf Salim said that the new government would implement the reforms bringing the country closer to accessing reconstruction funds and investments after last year's devastating war between Israeli occupation forces and the Hezbollah. In a speech, Salam said Lebanon would implement the UN Resolution 1701, which ended a previous war between Hezbollah and Israeli in 2006. And moving to the economy segment, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli asserted the state's keenness to follow up implementation of the local development program in Upper Egypt in cooperation with the international partners as the World Bank. Madbouli comments came during his meeting with the High Committee of the program in the attendance of Deputy Prime Minister for Industrial Development, Lieutenant General Kamil Wazir and the number of the ministers, Madbouli, highlighted the pivotal role played by the program in boosting principles of sustainable development in the Upper Egypt Governorate through major infrastructure projects. The U.S. dollar struggled for direction on Tuesday as markets became increasingly numb to U.S. tariff threats while awaiting the testimony from the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell later in the day and inflation data on Wednesday. U.S. President Donald Trump moved to sustainably raise the tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, and he said that he will announce the plans to impose the reciprocal tariffs on other countries over the coming days. The future priced in around 40 basis points worth of the Fed rate cuts by the year end, which implies 25 BP's cut and a 60% chance of a second easing move. The U.S. dollar index, which gauges the dollar's value relative to a basket of 6 major currencies, was flat at 108.38. It rose 0.37% last week and its biggest daily rise in almost a month after the U.S. jobs data. The euro was down 0.01% at 1.0305 US dollars, while the sterling dipped 0.01%. A White House official confirmed that 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports will take effect on March 4th. And the Minister of Finance, Ahmed Koshok, asserted the ministry's target to double the international world effort, which aims to boost easy financing development. Koshok's comments came during his participation in the preparation committee of the 4th International Financing Conference for Development in New York. The Minister of Finance added that the private sector role and the participation in financing development has to be increased through secure, attracting investments environment. And he also pointed that solving the debt problem in Africa paves the way for the real global financing reform and improves the continental development scale. And now to the sports segment, where the Egyptian Premier League, the 13th round, resumes on Tuesday with a match between Ahli and Ghazl al-Mahalla at 7 p.m. Cairo local time at the Salam Stadium. The Reds is seeking to achieve a third winning in row to move the top of the league, while Ghazl al-Mahalla is also seek to win the raised points. The Reds occupy the second place after Pyramid with the 29 points, while Ghazl al-Mahalla have only 5 points in the 15th place. And the manager, Carlo Ancelotti, said Manchester City was the worst possible rival Real Madrid could have been drawn against in the Champions League playoff. Of the described preparation process for this slowdown as a nightmare, as he braces for another high-stakes contest at the Etihad Stadium on Tuesday, when the winners of the last 3 titles face off for the 4th consecutive season in the knockout phase. Ancelotti thinks Real versus City has become Europe's biggest continental rivalry. Ancelotti talks from experience, as his side won the title in 2022 and last year after eliminating City, who reached the final in 2021 before finally claiming the first European crown in 2023. By this, we come to the end of our news bulletin on Channel 2. Thanks for watching. This is Sahar Talawi.